WNBA superstar Brittney Griner will be suspended without pay for 7 regular season games.
If you've spent any time in WNBA spaces over the past year, you've probably seen some version of this claim. Brittney Griner said something ugly about Caitlin Clark, and the league quietly suspended her for it. It's been repeated in reaction videos, in comment sections, in breaking news thumbnails with red banners and question marks slapped across a photo. And it feels believable, because it fits a story a lot of people already wanted to be true. Here's the problem. That suspension never happened. Not that season, not for that reason, not ever. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. Griner was suspended. 3 games. Just not for anything close to what the rumor says, and more than a year after the moment everyone points to. Today we're separating the two, piece by piece, with sources, so you can see exactly where the real story ends and the invented one begins. Let's get into it. The foul that started everything. To understand how this rumor got built, we have to go back to one specific night, May 22, 2025. The Indiana Fever on the road against the Atlanta Dream. Final score, Fever, 81-76. By that point in the season, Caitlin Clark wasn't just a rookie anymore. She was a full-blown phenomenon. Attendance was spiking in every arena the Fever visited. Broadcast numbers were climbing. Buildings that used to run half-empty on a weeknight were selling out for road games against teams that hadn't sniffed the playoffs in years. And with that spotlight came something that happens to pretty much every breakout star in a physical sport. Opposing veterans playing her harder than they play almost anyone else on the floor. That's not some conspiracy. It's just what tends to happen to rookies who suddenly become the center of attention. It happened in other sports, with other generational rookies, and it was happening to Clark in real time that season. That night, one of the veterans matched up against Indiana was Brittney Griner, by then an 11-year WNBA veteran, a former #1 overall pick, a 3-time Olympic gold medalist, and one of the most dominant interior defenders the league has produced. The two teams battled through a close game, and late in the fourth quarter, Griner picked up her 6th personal foul, the one that ends a player's night. Here's the detail that matters and that most retellings leave out entirely. The foul that fouled her out was called on a drive by Atlanta's own Natasha Howard. Not on a play involving Clark. That's a small detail, but it's exactly the kind of detail that gets erased once a story starts moving faster than the facts underneath it. Griner wasn't ejected for guarding Clark too physically. She fouled out on a different possession, guarding a teammate's assignment. Frustrated after fouling out, Griner walked toward the Atlanta bench, visibly upset, which is completely normal. Players vent after fouling out. It happens constantly across the league and is almost always forgotten by the next day's box score. What made this moment different wasn't what happened on the court. It's what happened to the clip after it left the building. The clip with no audio. Here's the single most important fact in this entire story, and it's the one detail most retellings conveniently skip. There was no audio. The broadcast camera caught Griner's face and her mouth moving as she walked to the bench. The broadcast microphones weren't positioned to pick up bench-level chatter from that distance. No official audio of what she said has ever surfaced, not from the league, not from the broadcast, not from anyone. What you're left with is lip reading. And if you've ever tried to read lips off a low-resolution clip replayed on a phone screen, you already know how unreliable that is. Camera angle, compression, how fast someone's talking, all of it distorts what people think they're seeing. This isn't a new phenomenon either. Silent clips have sparked full controversies in politics and entertainment for years, precisely because a silent video hands the viewer a blank space, and people are extremely good at filling blank spaces with whatever they already believe. Within hours of the clip circulating, 2 very different interpretations attached themselves to it. One interpretation claimed Griner said something derogatory, including language some read as referencing Clark's race. Screenshots were captioned as settled fact, and commentary accounts amplified the claim stripped of any of the uncertainty that should come with an unaudited, low-resolution clip. The other interpretation, argued by several sports journalists who slowed the footage down and studied it, was a far more mundane read, that what she actually said was closer to a frustrated jab at the officiating, not a comment directed at any player. 2 readings. 1 clip. zero audio, and an online audience that split immediately along the lines it already wanted to believe. This is worth sitting with, because it's not really a story about Brittney Griner yet. It's a story about how a 10-second silent video becomes a Rorschach test. People weren't reacting to what she said, they were reacting to what they already expected her to say, filtered through whatever they already believed about her, about the league, and about the broader cultural moment around women's basketball that season. Think about the mismatch in speed. Verifying a claim like this properly means tracking down enhanced audio if it exists, corroborating with people who were courtside, and waiting, sometimes days, for any response from the player herself. None of that fits inside the window when a clip is at its most viral. The first few hours, when engagement is highest and scrutiny is lowest. By the time slower, more careful reporting caught up, the caption had already done its job. What Griner actually said. This part, at least, we don't have to guess about, because Griner was asked directly, on the record, a few weeks later. On June 15th, roughly 3 weeks after the game, a reporter asked her point-blank about the viral clip before a game against the Washington Mystics. This wasn't one outlet chasing a scoop. The exchange was picked up and reported across multiple sports and entertainment outlets in the days that followed. By most accounts, her answer was unscripted and unguarded. She said she remembered fouling out and being frustrated about the specific call on the Howard drive, that officials told her she'd put her hand in. But when it came to the exact words she used walking to the bench, she said she genuinely couldn't recall them. The reporter reportedly offered to show her the clip to jog her memory. Her response, in substance, was that it wouldn't help. She wouldn't be able to tell from watching it either, since there's no sound for her to hear any more than there is for anyone else. Then came the more pointed question. Had she made a comment referencing race? Her answer was direct. No. She said there's no place for that kind of language in the league, and that it isn't something she would say. Now, it's important to be honest about what this evidence proves and what it doesn't. A denial isn't the same as forensic proof. Athletes deny things all the time, sometimes truthfully and sometimes not. Nobody watching a silent video from the upper deck, or from a phone screen months later, is in a position to declare with certainty what was said in that moment. What we can say with actual confidence is this: there is no verified, audio-confirmed record of Griner using a slur. What exists is a disputed lip-reading interpretation, a competing and more mundane interpretation from people who reviewed the same footage, and a direct on-the-record denial from the player herself. Any version of this story that skips past that presents the slur as confirmed fact instead of a disputed interpretation, isn't reporting what happened. It's reporting what somebody decided to believe happened, and presenting it with the confidence of established fact. The suspension that never happened. This is where the story takes its strangest turn, because somewhere in the retelling and re-retelling of this clip, a detail got added that never actually happened. Videos started circulating with titles claiming the WNBA had suspended Brittney Griner over the incident. Some claimed a multi-game ban. Others escalated further, an indefinite suspension, or the league quietly pushing her out. Some versions even piled on unrelated claims about her status in the league that had nothing to do with the original clip at all. Here's the plain fact: none of that occurred. Not in the days after the incident, not in the weeks after, not at any point tied to that specific moment. There is no league statement, no fine, no press release, no disciplinary record connecting any WNBA suspension to the May 22nd game or the clip that came out of it. If you actually go looking, what you find instead is a fact-checking trail. Multiple verification outlets have explicitly debunked suspension claims tied to Griner at different points, tracing the rumor back to social posts with no sourcing behind them at all. That flips the usual assumption people make about viral claims. Normally, we assume something spreads because there's at least a kernel of truth buried in it somewhere. Here, fact-checkers weren't debating whether the punishment was fair or too harsh. They were starting from a more basic place. There was no punishment to debate in the first place. The rumor wasn't an exaggerated version of something real. It was invented in full, then treated online with the same confidence as an actual league statement. And this wasn't even the only false Griner suspension rumor to circulate. A separate, completely unrelated claim went viral months later alleging she'd been suspended over an entirely different and even more baseless accusation, and it spread just as fast, with just as little pushback. Around a similar stretch, Griner actually was ejected from a game for a heated exchange with an official, a real event that some corners of the internet then mislabeled as proof of a suspension that, again, never happened. She also missed a handful of games around that period, which team reporting attributed to injury, not discipline. You start to see the pattern. Every few weeks, a new fragment of real footage, an ejection, a frustrated moment, a foul out, gets fed into the same rumor machine and comes out the other side relabeled as the suspension. The label stuck even as the details underneath it kept changing shape. Why this mattered to people? Why does this matter beyond just getting the facts straight? Because that season, the WNBA had launched a public campaign addressing exactly this kind of conduct in the league. Critics who believed the slur claim pointed to the league's silence as proof the campaign was hollow, evidence, they argued, that the league was quietly protecting a star player from consequences. That's an easy argument to make and an even easier one to repeat, because it turns the league's silence into proof of guilt rather than what it actually reflects. And that's a serious accusation that deserves a serious standard of evidence before anyone accepts it. You can't credibly accuse a league of covering up a suspension that every available record shows was never issued in the first place. If anything, the league staying silent on this specific incident is exactly what you'd expect when there's no audio, no confirmed evidence, and no basis for discipline. Not a cover-up, just an absence of anything to cover up. And that absence is exactly where the next part of the story gets complicated, because a suspension did eventually come. Just not the one anyone was talking about. The suspension that actually happened. Here's the part of this story that almost nobody pushing the Clark rumor ever mentions, because it complicates the narrative instead of confirming it. Brittney Griner was, in fact, suspended by the WNBA, just not for anything close to the viral clip. More than a year after the May 2025 foul-out, the league suspended Griner 3 games following a physical altercation during a game between the Dallas Wings and the Phoenix Mercury. According to League and Wire Service reporting, Griner became tangled up with an opposing player in the lane, a scuffle broke out, and Griner was suspended for throwing punches and pushing another player's face with an open hand. Multiple other players were disciplined for their roles in the same incident, including a player from the opposing team who was found to have instigated the initial contact, plus additional 1-game suspensions for players who left the bench area during the altercation. Read that again. Different season, different opponent, a physical altercation rather than a verbal comment. And by this point, Griner was back with the Phoenix Mercury, the franchise she spent over a decade with, not Atlanta. There is no reasonable reading of the record that connects the suspension to Caitlin Clark, to the May 2025 clip, or to any racial comment, alleged or otherwise. It's a completely separate disciplinary action, for a completely separate reason, involving completely different people, more than a year removed from the moment everyone insists it was punishment for. And yet, if you scroll past a video that opens with the 2025 clip and cuts straight to the WNBA finally suspended her, most viewers have no reason to question the connection. The emotional logic feels satisfying. Frustration, controversy, consequence. Cause and effect, wrapped up neatly, timed conveniently for a video that needed a payoff. Except it isn't cause and effect. It's 2 unrelated events, separated by more than a year, spliced together into a story that has the shape of a real narrative and none of the actual substance. How stories like this get built. This is also where a much older piece of context tends to get dragged back in, Griner's 2022 detention in Russia and her release in a prisoner exchange. That's real, well-documented history. She was held for roughly 10 months after cannabis oil was found in her luggage at a Moscow airport and was released in a trade in December 2022. It's a significant, heavily reported chapter of her life, one that shaped years of public conversation long before Caitlin Clark ever entered the league. But it happened nearly 3 years before the 2025 foul-out, involves an entirely different set of facts, and has no factual connection to a basketball game in Atlanta. When that history gets invoked in the same breath as the slur allegation, implying ingratitude, implying a pattern, it isn't adding context. It's adding emotional weight to a claim that, on its own, still has no audio, no confirmation, and no league action behind it. It's a shortcut. Instead of proving the accusation, you attach it to something the audience already has strong feelings about, and let those feelings do the convincing. That's the anatomy of how a manufactured story gets built. One real clip nobody can fully verify, one real historical fact from years earlier that has nothing to do with it, and one real disciplinary action from over a year later that also has nothing to do with it, all narrated together as if they're one continuous chain of cause and effect. They're not. They just feel like they are if you're not paying close attention. So, there it is. Not a cover-up, not delayed justice, just two unrelated events wearing the same headline. A frustrated foul-out with no audio to confirm anything either way. And a real suspension, over a year later, for an altercation that had nothing to do with Clark, the Fever, or that night in Atlanta. The rumor felt satisfying because it wrapped up clean. The truth doesn't wrap up clean, it just happens to be true. Next time a story feels too perfectly timed, that's your cue to slow down before you share it, not speed up. If you want more breakdowns like this, separating what's actually confirmed from what's just going viral around Caitlin Clark and the Fever, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.